Hi, this is Jolynn from One Heart TV today, and I'm bringing you a guest that I found and discovered of all places through the Facebook feed for videos. And I'm really excited to have her on. I have Michelle Gibson today with me. Michelle, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
She received her bachelor's degree in social work and psychology from the University of Maryland in Baltimore County in 1989. She has lived in many different places and has traveled extensively. She firmly believes that there would be no mysteries in his story if we had been told the true history. She has been fascinated by megaliths most of her life, and her journey has led her to uncover the key to the truth. Welcome again, Michelle.
Hi, I'm really glad to have you be on your show and meet you and have a chance to talk to you and your audience.
I'm excited too, Michelle. I love this kind of stuff. And you caught my attention because just last year I was lucky enough to travel to Montana to film my dear friend Julie Ryder, who has a whole stream of videos and discoveries she's made in Montana. And that's quite interesting. And I got to see sites that really take your breath away. And what really clued me in was how some of the things you were speaking on through the video that I discovered through, I think his name was Donut, I'm not sure, was that, if you start looking around your own backyard, you'd be surprised. And I want to tune into that part big time. So I want people to become curious and question. But can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you began getting into your research?
Be happy to. And I can talk for days. This subject is my passion, and I truly believe I incarnated to do this work because my connection to the information started when I was very young and grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in Rockville, Maryland, in Montgomery County, which is an affluent suburb of D.C. At least the part of Montgomery County I was living in was pretty affluent and affluent. And so I was raised in suburban DC, a lot of professional people, role models. Where I went to school, going to college was like 90% plus of the graduating class, as opposed to other places. So it was always an expectation, not only based on where I grew up, but also in my family. About going to college. So that was always a given. And I've got to start separating some things out here because it's kind of an interesting story. Let me first start with when I was 7 years old, and my dad played softball for the church softball team. And the practice was at the elementary school just down the hill from the church. And I was at an age where I really wasn't interested in watching the practice. So I'd go off in the woods. And there were big stones down at the bottom of the trail, huge stones. Again, keeping in mind, I grew up in Rockville. This was in Twin Brook, which is a part I found out when I was doing research later on it. That's part of Rock Creek. And if you look at pictures of Rock Creek going through Washington, you see big stones, big boulders in the water. Big clue there. That's how they've hidden this ancient advanced civilization in plain sight. They put clues in the names of things. It's all around us. We're literally sitting on top of this ancient civilization, which is what you were talking about. You just have to go outside your front door. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go to Egypt. You don't have to go anywhere else to start seeing this highly advanced civilization that was comfortable with building with giant stones, with bricks, right. You name it. This civilization built all of the infrastructure on the planet up until it was destroyed. Mm-hmm. And we're still using that infrastructure today. It was so durable. It was so enduring. We're still using it today. Aqueducts, canals, railroads, subways, streetcars where there's still streetcars. It was all interconnected. It was all based on sacred geometry. Earth is the mirror of the heavens. And these people knew what they were doing. I believe they go back to ancient Mu. We know them as Moors, but this was the same people that were the Hebrew Israelites. Because the 12 tribes, they were laid out in a pattern, a circular geometric pattern that correlated to the constellations, to the times of year. If you look at a medicine wheel and you start dividing that up, the civilization was laid out the same way. The people were laid out the same way the infrastructure was. It was very advanced. We were in unity consciousness. We were getting along with each other. And I'm going to leave that there right at this moment, because I want to kind of tie my story into that. And so
Sure.
I was always interested in history in school. I excelled at history, English, everything but math. I hated math. I didn't get it.
I know.
My brain is like verbal brain. I didn't, and when I graduated from high school, I went to junior college for a year. I changed my major every week. I liked history. I liked archaeology, but then I was also looking at broadcasting, even though I'm way better at stuff like this than I was when I was 18, 19. So I spent a year in a general curriculum in a junior college, and then I decided to join the Army.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, this was in 1982, that I enlisted. I enlisted in the spring, and I went to basic training in the fall of 1982. And it was kind of a quick decision for me, but I was impulsed to do that. And thank goodness I was, because it's one of the many reasons I'm able to do this work today. And I had the information come to me. If I had stayed where I was living, I would have been stuck into family patterns and expectations. And chances are better than not that I would not have awakened.
Yeah, and with a psych degree, you get the family patterns for sure. Sure.
Well, that's true. But the reason I double majored in social work and psychology is because you really can't do anything with a psych major. You can with a social work major. Sure. And after I got out of the Army, that's when I went to UMBC and got my BSW. But I had to double major. And so my field of choice was working with the elderly. And so I was into geriatric social work and did that most of my career as a social worker, which ended around 2005. And I haven't worked as a social worker since. But had I majored in history, and I tell people this, I don't think I would have been open to this information that I'm sharing today. I would have had my, can't think of the word, filters coming to mind, but that's not exactly what I'm looking for. My cognitive structures would have been geared towards this original history, I'm quite sure.
When you say history, what do you mean by that? What we're taught?
The true history. Well, I would not have been open to the true history of the earth and humanity.
Okay.
I would have gotten the false narrative that we've been taught from cradle to grave. A fabrication. It may be based on original history, but it's not the truth. The truth is all around us. It's in architecture. It's actually in Earth's land features as well. So when you see mesas and you see mountain ranges, a lot of them have pyramidal shapes. And when you look at mines, gold, silver, crystals,
iron, copper,
invariably they are connected with these shapes.
Right.
And I think that the ancients knew how to grow crystals and other chemical elements. I mean, I think that's part of what alchemy was about. They knew how to work with the elements. They knew how to create. They were much bigger than we are today. I think we've been engineered socially and in size and in skin color.
I have a question about that because I'm part of Gaia TV and I was watching the tall people that have existed. And here in California, off of the Catalina Islands, I've been told they found really large bones of humans. I mean, really tall, 7, 8, 12 feet tall, that existed around here. They were in a museum for a long time, I guess, in Santa Barbara, and then poof, they now you can't find them anywhere. Why are people what I know this probably to jumping the gun a little bit, but why are they trying to hide this history? I mean, that's the big question.
They don't want us to know it. They want to control us.
Okay. And
they want to control the creator and creation through humanity, since we don't know who we are.
Right.
And that gets also into the divine feminine that's been suppressed, the goddess that's been suppressed. And this is all about control, power, and control. They don't care about humanity. And I believe they are non-human entities that figured out a way to, I think, create a rip in the fabric of space-time, incarnate here into the bloodline families, what we know as the Illuminati, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts. I think they figured out a way to come into the royal lineage, so they can do what they've done.
Right.
Which is essentially create a new world from the old.
Mm-hmm.
I think they created a flood of mud around the world. It was dug out.
When you say a flood of mud, now I know that the Mayans have talked extensively about the 25,900 year cycle, which there was a flood. Even Graham Hancock has brought that up. There was very much so a flood that happened, possibly due to a meteor of some kind in the upper parts of the world.
I think it happened very recently. There may have been other cataclysms, but from what I'm seeing, there was an extremely integrated and unified worldwide civilization that was positive. We'd not see the level of integration and similarity of architecture around the world were that not the case. If there was some kind of extinction level event, we would not have survived. There's a lot of infrastructure under the ground. So people that were original humans could have survived down there, and the Hopi talk about coming into this world from the Grand Canyon, the Little Supapu.
Yes.
Helped by the ant people down there, they came out into this world. And other places, there's plenty of underground infrastructure. It's like whatever was here before built above ground and below ground, as above, so below, and it just goes down, down, and down. So there's many layers below us. But what we see, and especially in major cities, but in smaller communities as well, are buildings that appear to be built on an incline. Well, why would you do that?
Right.
Why would you build a building with a window that's like just barely coming up above ground? And as the slant goes down, the windows get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
And then you'll look at the front of a building and you'll see the same thing. There's a slant. It'll go up. And one of the best examples you can find of this on the internet is I believe it's called the Church of Mary Magdalene in Omaha, Nebraska. And I think all you have to do is search for Mary Magdalene, Omaha, and you'll probably find it, because this is a great example and it's used in a lot of different places. You see this church around, sometime in history, you see it, like it looks like it's being dug out. Mm-hmm. You see there's like a line where there's discoloration, and then there's a slant, which became the road. So between where the slant is and this top of this line of discoloration in these pictures, it's, clear, it looks very clear that they were digging it out of something. And they just paved the road over it. And so when you see pictures of the same structure today, you see it with this slanted road going down beside it. Well, you take that example and you multiply it. I can't even give you a number. It's more than hundreds of times. It's like
Yeah.
thousands of times
Wow.
all over the world, where not only were they, if they built it when they said they did, it doesn't make any sense. And then there's other buildings that have, you can tell that the levels are going down below the ground. So you'll have a window with a window well.
Right.
A lot of those. So you've got that aspect of it, but then you also find buildings in relationship with each other and cities in relationship with each other that are in linear alignment
Yeah. Your
or
video.
some kind of alignment. And that's what really got me started into this, except for the fact that I seem to have been picking up this information my whole life. Things that I've noticed, like the stones when I was 7. I grew up in Rockville, and we were about an hour's drive or so from Harper's Ferry. And so I've been to Harper's Ferry many times. That's an interesting place on a lot of different levels.
Mhm.
One of the places that you pass on the way that's very close to Harper's Ferry is called Point of Rocks, Maryland, and there's a train station there. Again, once I started looking at the code words that they use to cover it up, I started looking at those, and then as I followed these places in alignment, and let me show you how I started my own original work. And this map is really tattered, but I was living in Oklahoma between 2012 and 2016 when I started to wake up to this ancient civilization.
Mhm.
And I would go traveling with some friends of mine. I was going to Unity Spiritual Life Center at that time. And I had some friends from there that liked to go exploring with me. And one of them ordered me a map. And she said, I think you need this. And at the time I'm like, okay, whatever. But I put it up on a bulletin board on my dining room table and I studied it. And when I studied it, I started noticing cities lining up in lines. And it's kind of hard to tell about the original cities, but when I had studied sacred geometry through Drenville Melchizedek and the Flower of Life workshops.
Yes.
So I knew about the star tetrahedron, and I noticed that this is Edmonton up at the top, and I noticed that these cities, major cities in Canada, were lining up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that line, and then I followed these in North America that were lining up. And then I found this one, and I thought, well, maybe I wonder if I can find another one.
Yeah.
And so that was when I found this one, but I was following researchers by this time. Hugh Newman, he organizes the megalithomania conferences, which I learned a lot from. This is before I started doing my own original work that I mostly watched them. So I knew enough about the ancients to know that there were alignments and that they were very precise. That's what I learned from a lot of other researchers. But I got a really solid education in a lot of the alternative writers and histories. So one of the very first books I ever encountered around 2006, 2007 was a friend of mine who said you should read Fingerprints of the Gods. And I think she owned it. And that was Graham Hancock's book.
Yeah.
Talking about the lost civilization.
Right.
And then Robert Bauval, and he had a co-author, I think his name was Adrian Gilbert, and they wrote a book called The Orion Mystery. And that was about the belt stars of Orion lining up with the pyramids of Giza.
Right.
Now there's another researcher named Andrew Collins who says, no, it's not Orion, it's Cygnus. And he shows how there's a Cygnus alignment there. But there's alignments. And I have found 3 clusters of 3 pyramids in different places. And one of them is outside of Little Rock, Arkansas.
Really?
In Pinnacle Mountain State Park, there's a place where you can go where it's clearly a pyramid. And if you go to the visitor's observation deck at the visitor center on a clear day, you can see 2 other pyramids. They're all facing in the same direction. They look like the pyramids of Giza in the way they're lined out. But they had those other 2 so blocked off that you really can't get to them.
Wow.
Unless you happen to be on the Arkansas River, because there's a yacht club just past the third pyramid. But everywhere they have cut off access to everywhere else that you could go look at those. I was just saying, I think that the first, second, third mesa on the Hopi Reservation are probably the same, because Gary David is a researcher who's done extensive research on the southwest of the United States and shows that there is an Orion constellation layout in the ruins of Arizona. It's contained within the state of Arizona. Most of it's in the Four Corners area.
Right.
And that's where the Hopi Reservation is, and the Navajo Reservation. And then you see these correlations to all over the earth of like the Pleiades and Orion are the most common, but I'm sure there's other stars that have their own something. Because
Right.
I think there was balance and harmony between heaven and earth during the time of this civilization. And the new civilization that came in just knocked us way out of balance.
Yeah.
Knocked us off our feet, and then has deliberately kept us confused about the true nature of this reality, and actually shifted our understanding of this reality so that we wouldn't know.
So yeah, tell us more about this. Now there's something definitely going on. Definitely. You can feel it. For us who have awoken, I might say.
Mm-hmm.
And with a lot of the videos that I was catching, I was watching some of yours this morning. I love how you put together your video segments, because you don't really answer anything. You just give information for people to go, what's that all about? I love that about what you're doing with your videos. You're not leading anybody. You're wanting them to be led by their own conclusions. And so tell us a little bit what you're finding, because you did talk about buildings being constructed and how they look like ancient buildings in Greece and in Egypt. You just talk about golf courses. That was interesting in one of your interviews, and how what's going on with golf courses, different sites that have been, how should I say, buried, but built on top. A lot of civilizations do bury others. Kings did that to rectify over top of who they were. Go into this a little bit if you could.
Right. And I'll show a little bit more about my method. And then I'll just say that I question anything that we've been told about history. Absolutely. At this point. It just really adds to a lot of not really understanding how advanced we were.
Yes.
We were as advanced as any advanced race in the universe. And I'm going to assume that there are a number of people in your audience that are open to the idea that we're not alone.
Correct.
And I don't believe we are alone. I believe we were quarantined from the galactic family because of what happened here. Mm-hmm. But I believe that Earth was seeded by a lot of these other star nations. And because of the extent of the damage that's taken place here, in order to keep, and it still hasn't been completely contained, that we had to be quarantined. And they're out there, they're with us, they're helping us right now. That's part of my optimism that we're going to make it through this okay. But it's difficult. And so we had this relationship. So the only reason I don't watch Ancient Aliens. And I think the only reason the show Ancient Aliens has lasted as long as it has is because it's not called Ancient Humans. I believe we had a relationship with Ancient Aliens, but I don't believe Ancient Aliens built everything that we see that we can't explain.
Interesting. Okay.
So I think we were well aware of how to portal to different places in the universe. There's different places around the world that are, alleged to be portals. Where did that come from? And we didn't start out as cavemen, and this is the best we've ever been. That's
No,
not true.
no. I kind of agree with Graham Hancock in that if there was indeed a big flood, the people that are going to live through it are not going to be your scientists and people living in metropolitan areas, cities. They're going to be wiped out. So what's going to be left is people who can live on the land. That makes a lot of sense.
It does, and I do think the story is more complicated than that. But cities are what we know as big cities are special places. So you were talking about the architecture that looks like ancient Greece and Rome. Well, you see a lot of that in big cities.
It does.
Oh, well, we built that in the late 1800s, early 1900s in Greek revival style or Roman revival style or something like that.
Yeah.
But what was our technology like at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s? From what we're taught, we didn't have cars. They didn't come along until shortly after the beginning of the 1900s. And then the cars replaced all of the rail infrastructure that was already in place, that was already going everywhere, that was already using free energy, clean energy. Those streetcars got replaced.
Right.
The tracks got torn up. And then all of a sudden we have cars that we can go anywhere we want. I mean, people that come to Sedona love to go four-wheeling up in this is a sacred place.
Right.
Just take your car anywhere, or, you get into accidents and then you got the insurance companies coming in and you've got to pay for the gas and the gas prices go up. It's all part of how the system was rigged and how the original civilization's infrastructure was dismantled. It's just a piece of it. So, but people obviously survived.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, more people than the people that we know as the controllers, the wealthy families, the 13 bloodlines, obviously more than they survived, even though there's a lot of speculation about orphan trains and infantoriums, possibilities of test tube babies, and, very real. The evidence is there. Starting in the late 1800s on up to about 1942, there were babies in incubators inside shows.
Wow, I did not know that.
Just look up infantorium. They were sideshow attractions, and what we're told is that they were the healthcare, the neonatal healthcare for babies during those years.
Okay.
Makes no sense.
Well, it sounds a little bit about like today. Health, it's for the healthcare. Okay. We won't go down that rabbit hole right now, but
it's a rabbit hole because what happened to those babies?
Yeah.
And it could have been one of two things.
Okay.
It could have been used to repopulate the earth, or they could have been used by the elite for the things the elite do. So, and it wasn't long after the last infantorium ended at Coney Island that Planned Parenthood started.
Interesting.
It was the same year, around the same time, 1942, 1943, that Margaret Sanger started the organization that became Planned Parenthood.
Right.
So knowing what I know now that I didn't know years ago, I'm extremely suspect about what's really been going on, in terms of all these things. And that's probably the biggest part of what's been hidden from us, that we don't know, that we wouldn't believe if we were told.
I know.
Unless we've spent some time down the rabbit hole ourselves, because it's been very well hidden from us. So I'll talk a little. I can go off in so many different directions, and I apologize if this is meandering. But the non-human beings that did this are parasites. They don't have what we have. And so, as our souls, our connection to source, our direct connection to source, and they don't have that. They're not connected that way.
Yeah.
When I woke up to unity consciousness in 2012, I thought everything was all connected, and I'm thinking these creatures are not.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah.
And so they have to get their life support, if you will, from us. And so they get it from us working and paying them taxes and all this money that we pay them, going to theaters, going to malls, who's making the money up at the top.
Well, it definitely feels like a hamster wheel. That's sure. Going absolutely nowhere. And my interest here is just how hidden things are in our own backyard. Because when I went to Egypt a few years ago, specifically to hear the sound within the pyramids, because I'd been researching interesting things about sound healing and that they were doing it, and also the use of the pyramids in regards to electricity and water for the whole community, maybe the whole world grid of sorts with pyramids.
I think that's what it was. It was all part of a grid system.
And there's like 80,000 plus, maybe even more now, pyramids found below water and above that are still being found today as things are moving and shifting, maybe even in the ice. I don't know. There's all kinds of talk around that.
This was a finely tuned instrument.
I came back thinking, and especially from Egypt, we have nothing here in the Americas, and you talked a lot about there's a lot here in the America, and that we just need to have our eyes tuned in. In fact, Julie taught me that when I came back from Montana. I started look. There's one I'm gonna send you a picture. I mean it, of hill I cross every day on 101, and when I pass by it, I look at it and I go, that just doesn't look like your usual mountain hill. It's got a definite peak to it.
And you'll start noticing that more and more. Like I said, I can go in a lot of different directions, and I might circle back to something I'm thinking of right now. But I just wanted to share. So what I did after I found the star tetrahedron on the map.
Yeah.
And I started looking at places that were in alignment. I was seeing some really cool stuff, but I wanted to see what was on the other side.
Okay.
Now, what drives me are these places and cities and alignments. You call them ley lines, whatever.
Right.
I think they work both on a sphere model and a plane model. My work is not driven by whether the earth is flat or not. And I have a lot of people that follow my work that are definitely of that belief. I have encountered information that does provide proof in terms of what took place with maps and globes in the 1500s, and some other things having to do with time. So I'm open to it, but I care more about these beings trying to harm humanity.
Yes. Okay.
Than I do about the shape of the earth. I'm just put that out there, to be honest. It may be flat. That's fine. Something wants us dead. And we need to wake up. As many of us as are capable of waking up,
right,
to the fact that we live in a scripted reality. We live in our own version of Hollywood to give us, that sense of routine, the sense of, whatever purpose we have in our lives. But we've been given this as a narrative while these beings go around us and behind us and do terrible things to us.
Right.
And don't care. And so that's my concern. And so that's a lead in to say that when I was finding these alignments, I had to switch to a globe in order to see the other side.
Okay.
This was a flat map, not necessarily a flat earth map, but a flat map.
Okay.
And I was finding interesting things just looking at these alignments, but I couldn't figure out how to bring the line back around so I could continue that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had purchased a globe when I was living in Fairbanks, Alaska, which was between 2006 and 2012 before I moved to Oklahoma. And so I put my star tetrahedron on top of a globe, and then I followed alignments that came off of the tetrahedron. I took a magnifying glass and I wrote down the places that were in alignment. And some of them are in linear alignment, some of them are in circular alignment.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got about 19 pages or so of alignments here. And all of my research is based on looking at these places and cities in alignment. And when I started doing that, I started seeing the same kind of architecture and infrastructure all over the world.
Mhm.
I started seeing how the controllers moved in, and they were moving in along the grid system. They were taking over places with star forts and, really important infrastructure places. So they took over this grid system. I think a lot of our history is just backfill that what we're taught. And I'm thinking that this timeline's history probably started in the middle of the 1700s.
Oh, okay.
And so everything before that, I'm not real sure. After that is when I start seeing things happening. So like between 1715, 1800, 1830 is when settlers are starting to come into a lot more places. I mean, they've started, especially in North America, they've started looking around the 1800s or so. Around 1830 is when they really started setting up communities. There were breweries and distilleries popping up everywhere. There were orphanages popping up everywhere. And so they're building up. And then in 1850, 1851, I think was the official beginning of the New World Order timeline. I think it kicked off with the Crystal Palace exhibition in London, which was in 1851. And that everything in the Victorian era is part of this old civilization. And they were digging out enough infrastructure to restart it. Like you see pictures of streetcars around that time frame, and they're being pulled by mules, and within 20 or 30 years they're electrified. And then literally 30 years later they're gone in most places. So that's kind of a big clue. And that a lot of the history that we're taught, the Civil War, Revolutionary War, there's something else going on there. Maybe even destruction of infrastructure.
You even had buildings that you had discovered that were done. How could they have been built with the Civil War and so forth? The different wars, I should say.
And there's a lot of those.
How could they build them during those time periods when everything was focused on surviving through wartime?
You see a lot of stuff built around the Civil War. You see a lot of, and I mean, big, massive infrastructure projects. Right. Even the canals in North America, the Great American Canal Age was supposed to be starting in the 30s, 1830s. How? According to what we're taught, we had the Revolutionary War and muskets and, pretty primitive. And then within 50 years, they're building canals with megalithic stones and locks, sophisticated locks.
Right.
I think if they were doing anything, they were digging them out using immigrants and whatnot. I think the immigrants were digging out this infrastructure so they could use it.
Interesting. Okay.
And that was what was going on. They weren't building the canals. They weren't building the railroads. They were making the railroads and the canals usable. And then in the historical narrative, all this stuff is happening at the same time. They're building these canals, supposedly, and then they build the railroads, and then the canal's no longer useful. It's obsolete right after it's built. That story comes up over and over again. Oh, well, the train's so much more efficient than the canal, so it became the primary mode of transportation. And within a few years, the canals were just not used for transport. And then you hear the same, basically the same idea when you get cars and trucks coming in. Right. Oh, well, they're more efficient. And you see less and less. I mean, even though the rails are still used for freight and stuff like that. But again, the stories just don't match. And what I'm finding is once you start really looking into the narrative, which is the turn that my research has taken, is looking at the narrative, their story just like falls apart right away. They've gotten away with it for so long because we've been educated in it.
Sure.
In school, in movies, in music. It's what's in our minds, our cognitive structures. So we don't see it. We don't see the megalithic stones all around us that you're talking about.
It brings me, I've said this a lot doing social work myself with the kids. And I said, one of the things is the law of attraction really does exist. Say you want a car, a red car, that particular red car. You go out and you drive that particular red car, but you go home to think about it, try to look at your finances. What do you see on the way home? Everywhere. Your car, your red car on the freeway. You never saw it before, but now it's popping up. There's your car. There's your car, because your attention, your mind is on it. I think that's what happened with me when I came back from looking with Julie at the megaliths in Montana. Once you put your attention, if children were taught to look at things, critically think about things, whole different world.
And I haven't been able to corroborate this, but somebody left a comment once that the trivium that critical thinking is taught in was removed from the curriculum in 1851, which is around the same time frame. And the Rockefellers were heavily involved in at least in the American educational system, starting from around that same time. And they just wanted workers. They didn't want critical thinkers. They wanted to mold children into obedient citizens.
Interesting.
And that was the goal of the system. And if you look up Foster Gamble's Thrive website, he talks about that, the beginnings of compulsory education. So all of a sudden we're made to learn their history. And
what a way to do it, through the schools. Very easy.
They've come uncomfortably close to getting away with everything that they plan, but I am optimistic. And in terms of waking up in this dense world, there were more chances for me not to wake up along the way than to actually wake up. And I would say I started waking up in earnest around 2006, 2007.
Yeah.
But I had to make choices. I had to do things that were unconventional, not expected, but it was either spending my life helping others and serving others, close, people that were close to me, or living my own life. And of course, our conditioning is you've got to be there and help other people. You've got to, sacrifice your own needs for other people.
Yeah, we're getting that a lot right now.
Yeah, and I still, that's my nature, is I still gravitate towards that. But I have things in my astrology chart that kind of work with me to help me do those things that would otherwise be impossible, probably.
If you were to give advice to adults raising children, what would you say to them about getting started in awakening? What's a helpful hint or two that you could share with people?
I guess what I would say is what I tell people is just start looking in your own community. Look at older buildings in your community, like museums and courthouses, and if you have them.
Mm-hmm.
Parks, local, state, and national parks all provide cover for this original civilization. They tend to be preserved. Things tend to be preserved in those, and chances are very good that you'll see something. Megalithic stones, or some kind of infrastructure. And I know what I was going to circle back to when I was waking up to all of this in Oklahoma City. And I talk about it in my video on the relationship between the ancient civilization and the modern energy industry, because there is a connection.
Sure.
There is a structure in downtown Oklahoma City that has a pyramidal face on it. And then it's like an earthwork that goes back around, and then there's a building on the tail end of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's clearly man-made. And when I first really saw that, I'm thinking, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
And then I went trying to get close to it. I couldn't get close to it. There's a sign at the entrance that says no trespassing, but there's a sign right next to it that says, this is your Native American Indian Museum, or something like that. and
Mhm.
it will be ready in 2 or 3 or 4 years or whatever. That was back in around 2014, 2015
Hmm.
when I tuned into that.
Hmm. Hmm.
I drove up the road. I made a right, and I was in an industrial park area. Every single driveway was locked.
Really?
I went on the other side of the block was I-35,
Oh, how
and I zipped
convenient.
right past over the bridge on the other side of this structure on back onto Interstate 40. And there are cruises that go past there. But again, it looks like a particle accelerator. You can look at it on Google Earth. It's fascinating.
Wow.
But that was one of my waking up moments and my aha moments. And that whole part of, this civilization's everywhere, but Oklahoma City is where I woke up to it. And earthworks are literally everywhere. So start paying attention
Right.
to smooth surfaces, smooth grassy surfaces, and golf courses are a really good example.
Right.
I think mounds are earthworks, and they just made the golf course by carving out a sand trap. And it's another way that they lord over this original civilization by having their, elite sport on these old mounds. And what really woke me up to that was I got a map on the ancient Washita Empire of North America. And there's these mound sites all over the map.
Hmm.
And Jekyll Island has a golf course named Indian Mounds Golf Course.
Hmm.
And so that was when I really started to pay attention to mounds or golf courses as mound sites. I don't think they were made anytime recently. And I think they were part of the grid system. There may be burials associated with them, but I tend to see them more as infrastructure.
Interesting.
That there was a free energy generating grid system on Earth,
Sure.
but there was also connections with what's up in the heavens. So it could be talk about energy flows or some kind of way to interface with what's in the universe around us, because the universe is based on grids as well.
And we are.
And
As
we are based on grids as
I
well.
mean, that's chiropractors and acupuncturists work on that ancient Chinese medicine, yeah, there are the grids. We definitely haven't been taught that. They're not on the maps anymore, are they? There's no
No, they used to be. Ley
grid.
lines used to be on old maps.
Mhm.
And then they went to lines on water, but not on land.
Hmm.
And then we just went to longitude and latitude,
Yeah, we sure did.
kind of like the design behind me. But it used to be geometric. And in the older maps, the Cantino planisphere comes to mind, and the Catalan Atlas is another one. You can see, or any old maps, just Google old maps and just start looking for ley lines on the maps. They used to be on there. And like I said, I'm completely open to flat Earth. It's just not what is driving me to prove it or not. But I'm mentioning that because there's been some things happening more and more lately that have made me even wonder. Have you heard the idea that about Antarctica and the wall of ice that's surrounding us?
Yeah. Well, I've heard about Antarctica and there's some discoveries, but not much, no.
There's just some interesting things that have been coming to the surface lately. Another one is Middle Earth, Midgard, which shows up in Norse mythology, but is it really mythology? I think there's some clues in there. I think Norse runes are actually Vril, Vril, which is an ancient energy mastery knowledge that the ancients knew about. I think runes, you see what looks like Norse runes all over the earth. I've seen them in this desert of Yemen. The Hebner runestones in Oklahoma. I was just going to say, if people look up Vril and look up runes,
Okay.
Vril, the Vil is like runes,
Okay.
Vril, and Vril is like the life force. and it's neither positive or negative, just energy, but it can be used for positive or negative. And so the bad guys have been using it for negative.
Ooh.
So you hear Vril in association with the Nazi Germans.
Okay.
And the Vril women, the ones with the long hair, they want to tap into that secret because I think it has to do with how the ancients were able to do all of this stuff. So it's an actual language, but it's also an energy.
There's really a lot. And it sounds like, how many years have you been doing this research?
In depth since 2018, but I've been doing research on the ley lines and so forth since about 2016 when I found the North American star tetrahedron by connecting those cities in North America. That was when I really started looking at pictures and photos and starting to see the same things and asking myself, how am I going to show people what I'm seeing? Which kind of gets back to what you're saying. I mean, it's much more effective for me to show you rather than tell you.
Correct.
What I'm finding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so different from what we're told that, I don't think I would have lasted 5 minutes doing this if I was sitting here trying to tell you what I thought everything meant,
Right.
Which is why I do it that way. And the other thing is I'm a writer before I'm a video maker and speaker. So I do a blog and everything's all written out in my blog, all my research. Everything's exactly the way I want to say it. Good. And I just turn that into a script and turn everything into a video.
You do have a video site. Can you share that so people can kind of go to your site and check it out?
Sure. So I have on YouTube, I have Michelle Gibson. And if you type in Moors, Moors, my channel comes up right away.
Okay.
I have a blog site called piercingtheveilofillusion.com. I have Patreon /Piercing the Veil of Illusion. And then I'm on a new platform called Unguru that will launch on the 15th of October.
Nice.
And I will have social media groups on that, as well as some classes on sacred geometry. And there's going to be broadcasting. And I'm working on putting together interviews for like the full interview. And then I'm taking out parts of those interviews for what's going to be a fireside chat every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time, where the people that are watching are going to be able to ask questions at the end of it.
Oh, good.
So it's going to be interactive. And what's been happening so far with that is just blowing me away, because people are just reaching out to me and saying, hey, I've studied this and this and this. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do an interview? And I'm just blown away by what people with no experience making videos or anything like that are finding.
I think there's a lot of us hidden archaeologists that deep down, if we coulda, we would have gone to school or done something. But if you go to school, what I'm discovering, as we talked earlier, you are taught a certain way. And that's why a lot of people that have these breakthrough moments, such as yourself or Graham Hancock or Julie Ryder or whoever is out there, and they mention something different, mention anything different than what is in the textbooks, they shun it right away. And I think it goes back to even my curiosity, which I had an archaeology teacher way back, and she said a lot of times they would, the male archaeologists would pick up an artifact, like something like this, and look at it and say, we're not quite sure where this fits in, so we'll just put it over here for now. When women got involved as archaeologists, they looked at it and right away went, it could be da 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 da. And I'm like, it is a point of reflection of how you live in this world and how you observe the world. And if we don't have that ebb and flow, like what we're having now, what we're dealing with now.
And what has really, really helped me in this whole process is really good pattern recognition skills. I mean, almost, I'm not going to say photographic, but I'll see something and I'll think, I saw that over here.
Oh, yeah.
And then I can go over here and pull it and then put it side by side and show you the same thing.
Beautiful, beautiful.
and they're in completely different places,
That would help.
completely different parts of the world. Um,
Are you going to
and
be
that's,
giving tours by chance?
oh, anybody that comes to Sedona that, you can find I can send you my email address. Just let me know and I can show you around, give you a tour like
I'm going to
a
be
tour
looking
guide's not
you
going to
up.
give you.
I'm going to be looking you up. I'm going to be there in the spring and I'm looking forward to it. I so appreciate your time today. And when I do come, maybe I can film up front so people can really get an idea of what you're discovering, how you discovered it, what you're looking for, as you say, patterns. It's just getting used to it, and then somehow maybe you'll take it home and start looking around in your own backyard.
And that's really what this is about,
Yeah.
is starting to look for yourself and starting to question what you're told,
Right.
and how it's been covered up. I'm pretty convinced that rivers and canals, or rivers are canals and creeks are canals. And, maybe a lot of them are missing masonry. I know in Oklahoma, there's a lot of rivers that are just like red clay gashes in the landscape. But I found a place in downtown Oklahoma City where you can still see the old masonry, like a section of it, and the rest of it's a gash. And I can see where roots grew out over where there were rocks at one time. I've got pictures of that.
Right.
But, again, because of the conditioning, because of the programming, and because they're not called canals, major rivers like the Thames in England and the Clyde in Scotland, rivers in the United States, probably the Mississippi, which I think is just the reverse of the Nile River. Literally. Right. You can draw a straight line between the Mississippi River Delta and the Nile River Delta, straight line.
Yes, I've heard about that. Yeah.
And then there are Great Lakes in Africa. And I'm really being pulled to do a study of the Great Lakes of Africa, as well as the Great Lakes of North America, because I'm looking there a lot right now in North America. And it's like, okay, I gotta delve more into this, and then I got to talk about the Great Lakes in Africa, because that's significant as well. And the whole history of Africa was trashed, completely trashed.
Wow.
By European colonialism.
As
very sad.
So many.
Very sad.
So many. Well, I really, really want to thank you for taking your time today. And I'm looking forward to my trip in the spring to actually meet you. And I look forward to your up and coming different avenues of research, what you've got going on. And I'm glad that you've got some new programs. Again, where can they find you again? Those couple of places. I will put it down in the links as well.
Okay, and I'll send you the links so that you have it all. My website is piercingtheveilofillusion.com if you like to read. If you like to watch videos, YouTube, Michelle Gibson, and then type in Moors, Moors. When I made my YouTube channel, it was long before I started making videos, and it's too much trouble to try to change it to something that matches. So that's what I tell people. Patreon / Piercing the Veil of Illusion. And I do have exclusive content on that for Patreon supporters, as well as the same stuff that's on my YouTube channel for everybody.
Okay.
And then I'm on a platform that's going to launch in the middle of October called unguruyourlife.com. Right now it's Unguru. They're still working on ironing all the glitches out of the website, so the URL for that might change. So
okay.
I can send that to you at the end of the week.
You'll be letting people know as it approaches. So, well, thank you again, Michelle, for joining me today and giving people a little insight into his story. I always call it, where's the her story, but that's another story. And I look forward to seeing you in the near future.
I do want to make one more point.
Please.
Based on what you just said, the original peoples of the earth were matriarchal, and they were in harmony with natural law. They knew all about that, but it was a matriarchal culture. That's
a whole nother ticket that I know we could go off on, and I really, really enjoy that as well. Having gone to Greece, and they're still pulling up goddess statues in abundance there. So I do know that there have been multiple things that have happened on this planet. Beautiful globe we live on, beautiful. But we just don't have the whole story. We don't have the
Yeah.
whole story. And I'd like to know the whole story. I might not know it this lifetime, but I sure am getting glimpses, and you're one of those. So thank you.
Oh,
Thank you
thank you.
very, very much.
And thank you for the invitation to share with your community.
Yes, thank you. Again, this is Jolynn from One Heart TV. You can get updated videos on health and wellness, and even videos like these at One Heart TV on YouTube, oneheartinfo.org, or we have a Patreon where you can go a little deeper. Still One Heart TV. Thank you all again, and Michelle, adieu.
Adieu.